Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4 for a re-review of a ship that I've already talked about in World Warships Legends. I did a review on Blyskawica about a year and a half ago, and it's actually before I started including history and all of the other stuff in all of my reviews. So this time around we'll cover the history of the ship, my analysis, run down the stats again, and of course finish up with some fresh off the shelf gameplay. Like always, if you do want to skip to any portion of this review, you should find the chapter setup and time codes listed down in the description. Poland is a country that has historically struggled to exist, sometimes due to internal problems, but more often because it has neighbors to both sides of it who alternatively confuse the relatively flat Polish countryside as either Western Russia or Eastern Germany, or, at the very least, a good place to hold a war between those two powers. As the Great War, or World War I, drew to a close, the Second Polish Republic came into being. This is why Polish Independence Day is the same day as we Americans celebrate Veterans Day and the British celebrate Remembrance Day. In any case, starting in the 1920s, this meant that the new nation had to start a naval program. Starting with some older ships acquired from Germany, they eventually replaced those with a few newer ships, including the Vichy-class destroyers ordered from France. Now, if this looks familiar, it's probably because this is a modified Borsuk design. In spite of the very friendly relationship between France and Poland at the time, when the Polish 1933 naval program rolled around and Poland began looking to develop a new set of destroyers, they looked instead to England, who rumor has it knows something about boats, to build them, having found several fundamental problems with the French design, namely poor seakeeping characteristics, being underpowered for their size, and problems with their watertight compartments that lent to the ships being relatively easily disabled. So in 1935, construction began on two ships for the Polish Navy, the lead ship of her class, ORP Grom, and the Blyskawica. Laid down in September 1935, launched in October 1936, the Blyskawica, or Lightning in Polish, entered service in November 1937. On September 1st, 1939, the Polish Navy consists of, as far as I can tell, 4 destroyers, 5 submarines, mine layer, 6 minesweepers, 6 monitors, as well as several smaller boats. Most of these were sunk by the Luftwaffe over the following month. But in spite of the non-aggression pact between Poland and Germany, it was pretty obvious to the Poles that the agreement wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. 2 days before the German invasion of Poland, Blyskawica, Grom, and the second of the Vichy-class destroyers sailed for Edinburgh, even being sighted by the German cruiser Königsberg along the way. The Poles had worked out beforehand an agreement to participate with the Royal Navy and serve under her command structure, but that every Polish ship, including a few more leased by the Poles from Britain, would fly the Polish ensign, keep their own command structure, and that the ships themselves would be considered sovereign Polish territory. Much of the Blyskawica's service was dedicated to patrolling the North Atlantic and convoy escort duty. However, she did have several other notable actions during the war. In May 1940, she was part of the Royal Navy's Norwegian campaign, which was actually the Allies' plan to invade Norway, who they thought was a little too neutral in the war. This plan got turned on its head before it really even started, because Germany had very independently and coincidentally decided that Norway wasn't quite neutral enough and launched its own invasion just a couple days earlier. Blyskawica was part of the Allied forces, which tried to pivot quickly from being an invasion force to a rescue force. Serving alongside her sister ship Grom, she shot down 2 German aircraft. Unfortunately, Grom was damaged by air raids during the campaign and sunk on the 4th of May, 1940. As she was based in England in May later that year, it would be no surprise that she would participate in the miracle at Dunkirk. 2 years later, in May 1942, she was at the town of Cowes on the Isle of Wight, which coincidentally was where she was built. She was there for repairs and refit. Its commander, Wojciech Franki, insisted she remained manned and armed so that she could defend herself as well as the town. This choice turned out to be extremely fortuitous when a force of approximately 160 German bombers attacked the town. By this point in the war, her original 120mm guns had been swapped out for British 4-inch or 104mm dual-purpose surface and anti-aircraft weapons. Though in port, Blyskawica laid smoke and obscured the town as best she could, and put out such a ferocious and sustained volume of anti-aircraft fire that the crew had to throw water from the river over the barrels to keep them cool, and ferry in extra ammunition to keep up the defense. The determined effort by the Polish destroyer is commemorated by several markings throughout the town, and is even still celebrated on important anniversaries in Cowes. She would go on to serve in North Africa, then alongside Canadian destroyer squadrons in the English Channel. Here she would pick up a completely awesome nickname from her Canadian comrades, that being Bottle of Whiskey, since basically no one outside of Poland can pronounce anything in Polish. She would round out her service in World War II by providing fire support for the Normandy invasion, and then helping to scuttle 100 German submarines captured in Operation Deadlight. In spite of all of the action she saw, and being seriously damaged on 3 separate occasions, only 5 of Blyskawica's crew were killed during all of World War II. She would continue to serve Poland as a training ship after the war, and as a diplomatic vessel, making several port calls over the following decades. Though decommissioned in 1973, she is still a member of the Polish 3rd Naval Fleet, still flies the Polish ensign, and is used for important meetings, official celebrations, and other significant naval events like hosting promotion ceremonies for Polish naval officers. And if all of this history seems a bit long, there's a good reason for it. I know that a surprising number of Poles watch my channel, and this ship is really the pride of the Polish Navy, having been awarded the Golden Cross of the Order of Virtuti Militari, Poland's highest military honor, stretching back to the Napoleonic Wars, and a medal usually awarded only to people. So there is a lot to say about Blyskawica. The Blyskawica in World of Warships Legends came out first around a year and a half ago. At that point, she was the fastest destroyer in the game, and one of the most heavily gun-toting ships for her class. Thanks to the addition of Germans, Russians, French, and now even more Japanese destroyers, she's kind of been power crept a little bit in the speed department, and there are a lot of other decent gunboats out there. And even while I say that, understand that the Polish Lightning's speed is still significantly above average. All in all, Blyskawica does still have some key advantages though. With 7 main battery guns, there's no destroyer that you can face that is more likely to finish you off in 1 or 2 volleys if you've already lost some hit points. Since her damage per minute is only average though, Blyskawica is probably best used in situations where you have a little fire support or are hunting damaged ships. There are some ships with really slow turret traverse, so if you can get the drop on them while their guns are faced the wrong way, that is a really big plus. But do be careful when trying to engage other dedicated gunboats, particularly Americans. As a word of warning, you do present a very big target in any situation where you actually can get all 7 of your guns on target, thanks to your rear guns, in particular, having a relatively poor firing angle. This thing was fixed on PC, so it's possible that if you're viewing this in the distant future, maybe we've received a similar revision, so with any luck you can ignore this. One thing that hasn't changed is if you're looking for a ship that's going to be a really good torpedo boat, the Blyskawica is probably not for you. With only 6 torpedo tubes, her torpedoes don't have incredible range, they're fairly slow, and they don't do a ton of damage either. Oftentimes, you do not have the capacity to even sink a battleship outright, even if you hit with all 6 torpedoes. They do reload reasonably quickly, so you can get lots of opportunities to use them, and they're perfectly fine for area denial, but I wouldn't consider torpedoes to be the strong suit of this Polish destroyer. Now, as we look at the stats, I will mention that you'll see the Blyskawica Black's stats here, which is part of the reason why I'm doing a re-review. But I assure you that these stats are the same. This ship just lacks its current and historic camo. Also of note, particularly for my prideful Polish friends, the Blyskawica Black does not fly the Polish ensign unless you take the black camo off of it. Instead, it has this black commemorative flag which you may like or you may dislike. As we jump into stats, obviously we're starting out with survivability. With 55,500 hit points, there are more destroyers at tier 6 with fewer hit points than there are with more, but you aren't that much higher than average. While the 7 to 16 millimeters of armor here is pretty much the third least armored destroyer at the tier, that may mean that you want to fool around even less with enemy secondaries than the normal destroyer out there, though it probably won't make a huge difference. Blyskawica does come with a mixed battery of 1 single turret and 3 twin turrets, each mounting 120mm guns. This means the version of the Blyskawica that we see in game is essentially the ship as it exists at the beginning of World War II, and not the 4-inch dual-purpose guns which made it a thorn in the side of the Luftwaffe. In any case, this means that she has an impressive 7 guns, and the heaviest salvo for any destroyer at the tier. The 10.6 kilometer range is fairly average, and actually, due to the 6.5 second reload, your DPM is also close to middle of the pack. Your 120mm guns come with an 8% fire chance, and if you get all of your guns on target, this actually means that for a destroyer, you're one of the better fire starters. But you do need to be careful anytime you're trying to get all of your guns on one target, because you are a very big destroyer, which means that you're pretty easy to hit. Use of your AP shell should probably be limited only to the most advantageous or most desperate close quarters engagements, because it is pretty easy to bounce these shells. For torpedoes, the Blyskawica comes in with 2 triple launchers, which is obviously not that many torpedoes compared to other destroyers. They are nearly as slow as American torpedoes, being just 57 knots, but they do have a decent 8-kilometer range. One problem you may run into when using these fish are that they are hard to shoot at anything that is driving with any sort of concerted effort away from you, at least while you're in stealth. If you do hit, this 14,400 damage is on the weaker side of things, and this is mostly why I suggest this isn't a torpedo boat. It's not all bad news here, though, because like most of the slow torpedoes in the game, they are rather stealthy and offer your opponents less time to react than faster torpedoes, unless they're spotted with sonar. Also, this 70-second reload is faster than any other Tier 6 destroyer, with the exception of the Ognavoy, which, as a reminder, is actually a torpedo boat, running the 2x3 launchers, even if all of the other stats here do point to a below average DPM. At 39 knots, you are naturally faster than anything that isn't Russian, and trying to further increase your speed isn't a bad option for Blyskawica. That said, you can count on being outrun by French destroyers too if both of you are using your speed boost. Your turning circle is tighter than average, and among very fast destroyers, you do have a 60 to 90 meter tighter turning advantage, even if you do have the absolute slowest rudder shift of any Tier 6 destroyer, being about 50% worse than average. Right now, Blyskawica has the worst concealment of any destroyer at its tier. It's actually surprising to hear, but keep in mind that every person playing a Blyskawica will have Type 4 camo and a commander that also improves his concealment. Still, among folks determined to run high concealment builds opposite you, there's a very good chance that they will outspot you. In total, you're about 600 meters more visible than average by sea. You're still a little bit above average by air, and while firing in smoke, your relatively small guns draw very little attention to your location. And finally, as we come to consumables, I won't waste too much of your time. Essentially, you have smoke and speed. They are standard smoke and standard speed. They do standard things. You have the standard number of them, they have a standard duration, and standard recharge time. And now, with all the stats out of the way, we're going to be on Greece. We're going to be playing some World of Warships, of course. In the Blyskawica, here you see, looking at the map, I assume that had something to do with the battle starting. I'm not really sure. Obviously, with the national voices, our Polish destroyer here is in stiff competition with a couple of other languages as being the most completely indecipherable language in the game. I guess something to keep in mind if you do like the national voiceovers, it's kind of a self-imposed nerf when everything's just like, hey, something's happening. So here we go. We are moving out towards sea. There's a little bit of initial concern about TacticAngel doing this from my teammates. I think they might have been pinging me before the game actually started. Nope, there it is. In any case, as they're wondering about my sanity, I will go ahead, put my commander up on the screen. No surprise here, because Jeze Swirsky is, of course, one of the primary reasons you might purchase this particular ship, because he has a very useful commander base trait. In any case, I will be talking a little bit more about Jeze in the next couple of days, and I hope you join me for that particular video. But I would strongly suggest a build something like this. Now, moving all the way out towards the east side, people have decided, apparently, now that I am not listening to them, to not go over here, that they should support me, which is completely fine. I'm happy to run away if I need to. In any case, you see some really, really blind torpedoes launched out there. I put some torpedoes of my own out there into that smoke screen just about the time this Fubuki shows up. Now, the Fubuki has its guns faced in the wrong direction, which is pretty nice because, as you see, we've already shaved 4,000 damage off of him. Now, 5,700, and he still doesn't really have his guns on me. One last volley, and we do manage to finish him off. There's a lot of words there, and that means I think that I killed the first person in the game. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go away from this particular thing. Something about torpedoes, not really sure. Now the smart thing to do would be to try to go between these torpedoes. Instead, I think I'm going to go ahead and get around them. Torpedo beats denied. In any case, I'm not spotted anymore, and I take it right off of the back section of the ship, so in terms of making a mistake, I made a better mistake than taking it off the middle of my ship. And my Sims inspiration makes this a little bit less painful due to my extra hit points. So the back part of my ship is saturated at this point, which is you know, it's not great. We've wasted basically 2/3 of our hit points. Maybe 3/4, it's hard to say. But we're putting our torpedoes out there. They're not really fast, and obviously we have done very little to help make them any faster than they naturally are. It looks like we're starting a convention of destroyers here, and everybody's launching torpedoes against the Warspite B. Now with the Jervis jumping into the cap, obviously we spot him for a second. For some reason we have AP loaded, which is a terrible mistake. While we're not paying any attention, we managed to hit the Warspite B with some of those torpedoes. We are now, unfortunately, sonared, but the Jervis is also guaranteed spotting because somebody's doing something to allow that to happen. I can't really speculate what is happening, but it works. And thankfully we don't take any additional shots while the Jervis is in the last couple of seconds of his life. Being in this particular smoke screen is not a terrible idea since we already know where the Jervis's torpedoes went. We're going to try to abuse this Normandy as much as we possibly can. Hopefully catch him on fire. Once again, we are a pretty good fire starter, but like any destroyer with low fire chance per shot, you can end up kind of coming up with a lot of nothing. Now there is one fire on his bow. That's pretty good news for us. Now he's turning in and he probably wants to get rid of us because Collectively, I'm sure we're all very annoying to him. Any case, I have nothing to prove to that particular Normandy, so I'm going to go ahead and start to move off, particularly because of that mistake earlier in the game. Now you can see I do already have my torpedoes reloaded, so that means that I can, if I want to, send these out towards the Normandy. It doesn't look like anybody's really all that likely to want to shoot at him. I say that as I hear people behind me starting to shoot at him. Whatever. I can't be made responsible for their decisions. With a relatively small number of torpedoes, I do occasionally tend to make interesting patterns like that last one that you saw, which was a narrow spread inside of a wide spread. That's just to weight the maximum damage towards the middle and then maybe catch a little on the outside. I have all sorts of really weird theories about how to shoot torpedoes. In any case, our team is doing relatively well. We have managed to assist in the capture of one base, and as we're coming around here, we're using our twist and track to try to track down one of the enemy destroyers. Those destroyers are going to be probably the most important things for you to take out with the Blyskawica. You are pretty good at dealing with other destroyers, particularly if you can get the drop on them. The twist and track is really, really helpful in making sure that that happens rather than something else. Now there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be able to figure out where you are, more or less. So there's a little bit of a trade there, but I'm going to guess that that other destroyer that I'm hunting right now also has other ideas about what he wants to do with his life. Increasingly, it looks like he is moving in towards the middle, because I don't think that that Belfast is actually the closest ship to me. A moment later, I am proven right when that Benson jumps out from basically nowhere. He has a remarkably small number of hit points, which is probably good for me. That either means he's running a stock Benson or he's making some interesting decisions with his commander build. I'm not really sure what those would be. But we moderate our speed and turn in, manage to miss the shells that are coming in at us. And as we do that, you can see he's trying to cap this particular base. I turn a little bit further than I need to in order to get towards B, just in case he shot torpedoes wide. That would give me a little bit extra dodge. That is another destroyer a little bit further away. I am going to go ahead and just make his life a little bit worse by shooting a whole bunch of torpedoes and make him think about that while I charge in. This is actually a situation where the fact that your torpedoes are exceptionally slow is not the worst thing in the world, because as he starts to see those torpedoes, he's actually going to probably have to spend some of his mental power to dodge them around the time that I am also moving into his range of guaranteed detectability. So he'll be a little off balance. As you can see, our torpedoes finish slamming into the island. He's still adjusting. We managed to get the drop on him. His turrets just barely get around towards us. And as we turn around, we see, oh, there's guys now. We go ahead, slam on the brakes, and try our very, very best to stop. Our 2.5 kilometer detection here is going to help us quite a bit, because obviously he's pretty close to us. We can lay out a lot of fire on the Benson, even if our rate of fire isn't all that impressive. No destroyer likes getting hit by 7 shells. No destroyer likes getting hit for over 1400 damage. In any case, cap control, anti-destroyer gameplay is pretty much the name of the game in Blyskawica. Pretty much similar to what you would see in American destroyers, though I probably suspect that you're better at the cap control and a little bit less capable with gun battles than American destroyers. You do have the advantage if you can get the drop on other people. Now, 39 knots is not an incredibly fast destroyer in today's meta, but it's still very, very fast as a sustained rate of speed, and that speed boost obviously is going to take you well into the lower or mid 40s, so really nice. Blyskawica, I do wish that they would fix its rear gun angles just a little bit, but it's still a fun ship to play, and it's a ship with a lot of history. Now obviously we're here playing with the traditional camouflage as opposed to the Blyskawica Black. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this re-review. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you on the next one.
PlayStation.